Hey there, my name is Christina. On my socials, you can find me at Budget Money Pro. I wanted to come on today and just have a little discussion around this question that I see a lot. Is now a good time to buy a house or to jump into the real estate market? And so, if you don't know who I am, first of all, I'm a wife and mom of four. I am a financial professional. I've done many things in the financial space, including a real estate agent, mortgage lender, banker, insurance. I've just done a lot of stuff, taxes, a lot. I've just done a lot over a course of 20 years. And I wanted to just give my perspective on this question that I see asked a lot. And just for a little bit of background, again, I was a real estate agent during the last housing crisis, the housing bubble of 2008. I actually got into the mortgage lending space before you had to be actually licensed in that space. I was doing that. Then I became a real estate agent. And I did that before, during, and after the housing crisis. So I kind of was able to walk through that process and see how things unfolded. And I was in the Atlanta market during that time. And what I would say is that it was like, for me, when I thought back on it, it was like somebody flipped a switch. Things were going fine, lending was going well. And then one day it was like suddenly lenders started closing their doors, banks were shutting down. And so of course, this affected lending. This affected people being able to get approved for mortgages. Of course, the other effects were that people were losing their jobs. So this was affecting the economy. It was overall ripple effects in the economy, which caused, several things to happen. One, the market cooled down tremendously. It was harder to get buyers for the homes. Housing prices began to decline. Just a lot of different things were happening. And so as I look back on that experience and then even after going into the banking sector and having conversations with people over the years and their perspective on 2008, because 2008 was one of those things that affected many, many, many people. Like almost no one was unaffected. But it affected many people, and having conversations with different people along different spectrums, even from the investor standpoint, it had severe ripple effects. So that's where I want to kind of start off. Now, before I get into the content, let me just say I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not here to give you financial advice. Your money is your own, and you should, take that responsibility of how you choose to manage your money. But what I am here to do is just share my knowledge, my skills, my experience with you in the financial space, so that hopefully it helps you navigate the financial world confidently, even if you've had financial challenges. So with that being said, again, I believe that real estate is first and foremost, it's an investment, and you have to start looking at it from an investor mindset, because one of the key takeaways that I had from my 2008 experience in real estate was that many people were under the impression that real estate would just continue to go up, continue to rise. And of course, we know that is not the case. As a matter of fact, there's some people who've never recuperated from the crash of 2008 as far as their home values are concerned. And so real estate is an investment. Whether you're buying it as an owner occupant or you're buying it as an investor, it's always going to be an investment because it's affected by the market ups and downs, right? And so you have to keep that in mind. The investor mindset is buy low, sell high. Now, although I feel that we are at a point of all-time highs in the real estate market, when you look over a period of time, when you look over historically, I should say, when you look historically at prices, we are at all-time highs in the real estate market. With that being said, that doesn't mean there aren't good deals. It doesn't mean you cannot buy low and sell high right now. It just means that we are historically at all-time highs, and that's something that you have to keep in mind with when you're going into it with an investor mindset. All right. So the other thing, that you have to ask as you're, or you have to consider as you're thinking about, is now a good time for you to jump into the market, are what are the current conditions? So as a recording of this video, it is the end of 2020. Well, here's what 2020 has brought us regarding the housing market. It's brought us very, very low interest rates, right? And this has caused a lot of buyers to run into the market because the rates are so low. And I don't know if people realize this, but the lower rates actually mean you qualify for a lot more house than the rate if the rates were higher. So again, it's caused a lot of buyers to come into the market because the rates are so low. And when they talk to a lender and the lender says, oh, you qualify for this, it's like, really? And it's pushed a lot of people into the market. Now, from the seller side, it has created a seller's market. So the sellers are experiencing multiple offers on their properties in a lot of areas, bidding wars, accepting offers over asking. All of this is a condition of our current market with the rates being so low and pushing so many buyers into the market. I mean, as a matter of fact, as I've talked to people and surveilled the landscape in real estate, a lot of people jumped into the market in 2020 that otherwise would not have, simply because the real estate interest rates were so low. The mortgage interest rates were so low. It was almost like, why not? And so that's something that you have to think about. And because it's such a seller's market, here's what the other side of that is for buyers. Buyers have to bring their A game in the current conditions that have been experienced in 2020, because sellers have their pick of the draw. They're getting multiple offers, so they don't have to, come to the table with concessions, meaning they don't have to pay closing costs. They don't have to do certain things right now because there's so much competition for one property. And so that's something for buyers to think about. So while rates are extremely low, and that's very attractive for buyers, on the other side of that, we have buyers who are experiencing some fatigue and some burnout because it's becoming more difficult to locate a property because there's so much competition for it. And because they have to do more to get that property, meaning they have to pay all their closing costs unless they have another way to do it, through some other program. But if the seller is not willing to pay it, that means those costs fall on the buyer. It means that they may have to outbid someone. So again, it is some challenges for some buyers, depending on the area you're in, of course. But in some areas, it has been challenging for buyers because the very low interest rates have flooded buyers into the market, and the inventory in a lot of areas have not been plentiful to keep up with the buyer demand. And of course, that makes for tougher negotiating when it comes to buyers. So that's something to consider, what's going on in the market right now. And so here's something else that has to be brought to the discussion is, what are the market predictions, right? So there are economists, analysts that are constantly analyzing our economy. And how I mentioned that historically we are at all-time highs in real estate prices. That's something to think about. Now, not only that, we know that 2020 has brought record unemployment. Most of us understand why that is. And the record unemployment that was more of like a suddenly thing that happened earlier in 2020, it brought legislation in to try to help people going through that lull in employment. And a lot of people took advantage of provisions in the CARES Act that allowed them to stop making mortgage payments for a period of time. I believe it gave you up to 12 months to not make payments. I believe that's the provision of the CARES Act, but some people have taken advantage of it because they just didn't have a choice. And because of my hindsight being 2020, looking back at 2008, the fallout from that, I remember the burden of going through the mortgage modification process. And so what we don't really know, but it doesn't look great, is that the mortgage moratorium is in effect. Once those provisions run out, how are those mortgages going to be handled by the lenders? Are they going to be able to work out a modification or some sort of deal with those homeowners to be able to keep their property? We know that even if you're looking at the investor side of things, investors who have properties with renters in it who took advantage of the rent moratoriums, once those provisions expire, what are those landlords going to do with those properties? Are they going to go to the market for sale? How does that affect the amount of inventory on the market? Are there going to be enough buyers to buy them up? These are all things that have to be looked at on the horizon. Many are saying it's going to be a housing crash. I, tend to believe that is more of the narrative that's going to happen based on history, because again, we know that real estate prices do not just continue to rise, and because of the fallout of the events of 2020, the record unemployment that has not been resolved, the mortgage moratorium that has yet to be really dealt with as far as how the lenders are going to handle it. Are they going to be able to help homeowners stay in their homes if they had to take advantage? That's yet to be seen. And what I've seen in my previous experience is that a lot of properties flood the market cools down, the housing prices cool down. I specifically remember so much inventory came on the market that it was like overnight people's equity was just obliterated, meaning the homeowners' value of their homes was dropped drastically. Some people ended up being upside down, meaning they owed more on their home than it was worth, just because of the fallout of the housing crash of 2008. So we don't know, but if history is an indicator, that could happen now. We could see a dramatic decrease in the value of homes. We could see a lot of people end up being in a negative equity situation as a result of the fallout from record unemployment, the mortgage moratoriums, and how all of those things are going to be handled going to the future. So these are just things to consider. If you are in the market to buy a house now, you have to look at, what does the future look like for me buying a house? Because you may buy it now and you have equity, but what happens in 2 years, a year, 6 years, 5 years? What happens if there is a decline in the housing market? Are you preparing yourself for that, right? Because maybe it's your forever home, so you're like, well, I'm just going to be here anyway. These are things to think about, though. The current predictions for our market, the current conditions of our current economy, and how it's going to play out going forward. This is something, to add to the discussion when you're thinking about jumping into the real estate market. Now, the last point that I want to discuss with this particular question is basically about what your goals are. That should be the ultimate decision maker for you. What are your goals? How does it factor into the other elements that I've discussed in this video? Were you planning on a short-term investment? And this is, considering the market predictions right now, short-term investment, you really need to consider how you can maneuver or how you can work through an exit strategy if in the short term the market takes a dive or the market crashes or declines rapidly, and you have a short-term window to hold that property. I would say less than 5 years, right? If that's your goal, you need to be prepared for, how do I still accomplish my goal if I'm purchasing now and the market is set to decline? So you have to make that provision. Again, if it's long-term investment, more than 5 to 10 years, you're going to stay in that property. You probably can, weather the storm, but your goals should be, how do I weather a potential decline in the housing market if I'm buying at the height of the market? It should also help you frame, you know, costs, like looking historically in your area at housing prices and what prices are going or what homes are going for now to compare. Okay, am I at the height of the market in purchasing this property, or am I somewhere in the middle, or I'm at the bottom? That's something to think about when you factor in your goals for either a short-term investment or long-term investment. In the short term, how do you make sure you have an exit strategy for a short-term investment in the event of a housing crash? And in a long-term investment, how do you navigate the storm of a potential housing crash? And how do you make sure you get back on the other side of that storm with your home ownership still intact? Those are things that you need to think about, you know, as you are contemplating this question. Hey, is now a good time to buy a house for me, for my family? Is this a good time for me to jump in and invest? These are all points that I just wanted to bring to the fore to help you decide like what's best for you right now. So with all that said, I do have a free mini course, Credit Secrets for Approval. It's basically a guide to getting through the approval process. And I created this mini course with the idea of helping those who want to get into the market, who want to buy a home. Maybe they've had some challenges. Maybe they just don't really know where to start and how to position themselves to properly so that they can benefit through the process versus not benefiting or versus losing out. So I wanted to frame this in a way from my perspective of how do you go about going through the home buying process, making sure that you're protecting yourself. And, you know, again, this is just an element of that of, hey, how do I determine if it's even the right time, right? So that's what the Credit Secrets for Approval. It's really about how to simplify that process for yourself of if you're going into the market to purchase, how do you make it as simple as possible, as seamless as possible, less stress for yourself to get through the process. So with that being said, that is it for this video. I definitely hope you check out my free mini course, Credit Secrets for Approval. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.